Okay, moving to Mr. Harule Stokes. He has written a book called Sectors. This is a very, very interesting book. I had a very interesting conversation with him about this book. For the sake of our viewers, why don't you tell them a little bit about your book?
Well, Sectors is it's set in a futuristic time, and basically it boils down to a young man trying to find himself in a very difficult place, trying to kind of extricate himself from a lifestyle that he doesn't really want to be leading. He's recruited as basically a police officer, subjugating a whole separate group of people who lost in a previous war that he wasn't a part of. And he goes through some changes in his life, and just trying to find his way out of this situation is pretty much what the book is about.
Mm-hmm. Now, a little groundwork for this book, just to give you a little taste. This is the Northern Alliance, right? And this is the future. They are the Kenosas, right? Kenosians. Yes. And there are people who manipulate plant life. Everything
Yes.
that they do, they manipulate plant life, and they are empowered. And the North is are the ones who
are subjugating
and fighting against these people. They have this war.
Yes.
In order for North to overcome the Kenosas, right? They come up with warriors for themselves, and
Yes.
a lot of people sacrifice their lives in order, and it was known as a sacrifice in order for them to come up with these, superhuman warriors. So, and in short, they became the fingers of God.
Yes.
In this war, and they had this powerful weapon. They won the war, but the problem with the sacrifice and these people becoming these
Fingers of God.
fingers of God, their minds eroded.
Right. The process isn't as natural as a Kenosian's process.
Right.
And filling them with chemicals and lots of different things, it is not good for your brain. As we've learned pretty much throughout history, when you fill people with lots of drugs, it rarely ever turns out well for the person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much what happens.
So this is what happens to them, and then they become the fallen, because after the war they're no longer needed, and their seed are called the next gen.
Right, their children are the next gen. The fallen, what ultimately happens is that they have to be stopped because they become violent. Some become very violent, some very destructive. And you can't allow someone with that much power to simply roam free, and you're not sure what he's going to do. So they actually had other fallens kill other fallen. So they were soldiers killing other soldiers at this point to stop them from doing these things. And their children, which they ultimately end up having, are also empowered, also very powerful. And they've been given a moniker of next gen.
The next gen. And so after this war, they're holding the Kenosians under siege, or they're
right, they're kept
them captive.
Yeah, they're kept in an area called sectors, and the sectors is basically a concentration camp.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so we just want to give you a little taste so you can understand what's going on in the story. And so this gentleman, I read that part, he finds out, he comes into power, and he starts growing, and he starts finding out his father and mother, he's one of the next gens that it actually took on him.
Right.
So having said that, this is the book. You need to read this. It's a very, very good book. What gave you the idea to write this book?
Well, actually, it's very interesting. My first thought was to do a take on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and to kind of just turn it around and just kind of turn it a little bit, just tweak it a bit, to show that basically they're wrong. The Israelis are wrong. And what I ended up finding out the more I delved into the book was that that's a really questionable thing, because when you're afraid that somebody's going to harm you, you act in a way that's reasonable for you. So for the Northerners, who my thought was that they would be the Israelis. it's reasonable. Their actions are reasonable. You can understand their actions.
But the Kinosians, who only do all their power comes from plant life.
Right.
No chemicals, no drugs, and the Northerners are scared of these simple people who live simple.
Right. Well, simple is questionable as well, because they've enabled themselves in plant life to reach a level of technology that's comparable. Just manipulating plant life. It's no different than manipulating concrete or steel. They just use plants for the exact same thing. But because it's very much like them, where they have the next gen, they have the empowered, where their children are just as strong as next gen. And it's like having a nuclear bomb. They have one as well. How do you stop them from using it against you? And that's pretty much, at some point they develop a system so that they can keep them subjugated, keep them under thumb. And
Oh
do it a very
yes, we
public
didn't
way.
talk about that.
Yeah.
They since the Kinosians, the ones who only use plant life, they're under in these sectors, these concentration camps, because they want to keep them in check, and they do it by the peace collar.
It's a collaring system, yeah.
Collaring system.
And they have the next gen pretty much police this area, go and find who's empowered. If they're empowered, and they will capture anybody, including children, and place this collar around them. And the collar injects a drug that kind of suppresses them, but it suppresses not just physically but mentally as well. So you could take a 10-year-old child and strip them of their minds. I mean, that's terrible. And that's the dilemma the main character has to go through. He has to kind of come to terms with the fact that he's taking these babies basically and kind of making them vegetables.
So and there's more to the story. There's so much more. And you're right. I mean, you can kind of compare that to what's going on today. You know, people being kept captive. It sort of reminded me of apartheid. You know, they lived in certain places. They couldn't leave and go without having proper papers. India and being subject to Britain. So, yeah, you can put different things that are happening today.
Yeah, that's why I say I started out with Israelis and Palestinians, but it branched out so much more. It branched out to so many instances where people were subjugated. And I felt that their voices needed to be heard as well. So I put their experiences and I kind of smushed it all into the Kinosians.
And it's also, I mean, African Americans.
Yes, it's all brown people apparently.
Yeah, all people. I mean, people of color. Period.
Yes.
You know, I mean, this is, and the fact of one group of people so scared of another group of people that they go to these lengths to keep these groups of people subject and keep them in check.
But
no matter
and it's reasonable. I mean, their feelings are reasonable, considered that these people are just as powerful as their biggest weapon that they have at the moment.
Well, I guess reasonable is like what side of the fence you're sitting on.
Exactly. That's how the whole story is.
If you being subject is not reasonable.
Reasonable when it's you.
if you are the oppressor, it's reasonable.
It's reasonable
in your
for the
mind.
oppressor, but never
the
it is.
people who
Never
are
for
being
the
oppressed,
oppressed.
it's not reasonable for them.
And it's that shifting of the viewpoint, because the main character is of the North, so you kind of have his viewpoint at the beginning of the story, and as he meets more and more Kinosians, he starts to see that there's really no difference between me and this person, that they are just like me, and they're afraid just as I'm afraid. They're afraid of me, and I'm afraid of them. And where does it end? And so it has to end somewhere, and he has to figure it out.
And see, you can how you weave the story and how you go into it is very. I mean, this is a very interesting book, because if you just read the back of it, it'll get you, well, let me read this. Oh, what do you got in here? So once you start reading it, then you just can't put it down. So I like the way you put it together.
Thank you.
It's very, very good. Hopefully, where would you like to take this? Where would you, because I won't tell you where I see this, but where would you like to take this?
As far as it can go, movies, TV if possible, everywhere. Graphic novels, it has no... It shouldn't have any boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's artwork, and it can expand as far as it will go. So wherever it goes and wherever it takes me, I'm willing to ride it out.
Oh, that's good, because I see it as a movie, and comic books, and graphic novels, and I see all of that. So this is very good. We're gonna come back to Mr. Harule. We're gonna continue.